But I want to go ahead and kick things off, and because I know we have a lot to talk about. Archon 3, I think, was a pretty big success, but we also have some issues we need to talk through. And before we do a dev update, I do want to address one issue, which was that I should have mentioned this at the top of the demo, and I didn't. I was without sleep. No excuses. I was without sleep and a little bit overloaded. But at the last minute, we hit a bug, and so we had to switch back from the server over to the S3 data serve, and that's not because the technology can't do it, but we hit a last demo bug, and we thought rather than or I made a call, just stop the whole thing, and not have people have the immersive experience, that we go ahead and serve the data up that way, and then switch it over. And so the demo is going to be running for the next 6 months, and Kayvon is back from resting, and we'll fix that last little bit, and people will be able to experience it off the chain, running from the chain. So it's not a big deal, and I really appreciate the S3 guys keeping us honest. There's no reason why the data isn't going to be served off the test net, or the shard that's set up for RSong. That's not a problem, not an issue. But we didn't want to prevent people from having a good immersive experience when we threw the switch. So I made the judgment call right at the last minute to switch it over from the shard server back to the S3 server because of the bug we found. I also want to say that I'm really, really happy about. I mean, our developers are working round the clock to nail a bunch of stuff, because we found no less than 5 race conditions inside the node in order to that were preventing the RSong application from delivering. And in the space of 36 hours around the clock, Kent Shikama, and with support from the rest of the dev team, nailed all 5 of those. So those have all been nailed and checked in, and we just have a little bit of an issue with the interface between the proxy and the player that we have to fix up, and then the RSong demo will be serving off of the RSong shard. So. The other thing that I learned as a result of this is that we need to get more of the applications. Sorry about the dogs here. It's Moldova. But the other thing that I learned is that we really need to lean on all of the companies that should be writing code against the platform. If they had been writing code against the platform, then alongside of us, they would have hit all of these race conditions. So we cannot get the node to stable unless we are having as many applications as possible running against the node. So as many applications like RSong as possible should be written, and to ensure the stability of the node. I'm extremely excited and very, very positive about the push that we made in order to get RSong up and ready, and I think it's a testament to the focus and determination of the dev team to get it to this point. And we will be throwing the switch again in just a few days, so that people can experience it and verify for themselves exactly where the packets are coming from. So with that, let me open it up for questions, and then after the questions, we'll turn it over to Meta for the dev update. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question. There was some comment about straightening the record with some press about exactly what happened in Berlin with respect to this, and I'm hoping that will go forward. I appreciate your explanation and confidence. I share it, but I hope that the media team is able to make a good story out of it.
Yeah, I think so. We can certainly we can certainly address that. Um, Radical transparency is really important, and that's why I'm standing up here and or walking along with the phone to my ear to make sure that people understand exactly what happened. Yeah, I don't want people ever to feel like, oh, we're doing anything other than what they can verify um, with their own deployments. So yeah, we certainly want to do that. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Not on the demo specifically, but just wondering when details on the RSong deal will be made public.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. As soon as I got off the RCon 3 demo, I really needed a little bit of downtime. So as soon as I get back in the saddle, I can put that up on the GitHub for people to take a look at. Any other questions?
Greg, this is a little bit off topic, but since you're talking about RCon 3, could you just give a 2-minute assessment of how things went and how you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I felt really, really positive. I felt like we had a really good turnout. I felt like people grasped what we're doing. I felt like there are a range of different sessions and that was important because there's a range of different things that we are doing. And I think that people kind of began to see the scope and the depth and the breadth of what it is that RChain means and what RChain is delivering. So I felt very, very positive. There were a couple of things that was less happy about. One was we had a world-class band, a guy who's played alongside David Bowie and Robert Fripp and the Talking Heads and Paul Simon. So he was up there and played for an audience of about maybe 24. So I felt sad about that. I thought I guess I had misjudged sort of the overlap between the RCon 3 audience and the Adrian Belew fans. I would have expected there to be a considerable more overlap. Had I thought that, I would have put considerable more effort into promoting the event, including offering food and other things. So that was a little bit of a hiccup. But overall, I felt it was really, really good, really positive. We hit all of the goals, with the exception of having a little bug at the end for the demo. But we hit all of our goals. Everything that we had promised the community we would be doing, we did. So we launched testnet. RChain Europe is official. We have all of these researchers in the pipeline ready to join our RChain research, and the RSong was in fact a rabbit out of a hat. It was icing on the cake relative to what we were promising. If we just delivered testnet alone, it would have been worth the celebration. But in fact, we had so much more, and I think many people understood that. A couple of highlights for me personally. One was the Burning Man session. I think a lot of people understood what it meant for us to have a presence at Burning Man, and a lot of people understood the significance having the node running in that kind of setting on a Raspberry Pi out in the desert on the playa. I think that the import of that shouldn't be lost on people who think about what it is we're trying to do. And I also I felt like the Blockchain 3.0 panel, and despite the fact that we didn't quite have the speakers we were hoping for, turned out to be a roaring success because of the way there was this engagement with the community and people really speaking to why it is they're showing up for RChain. And in my opinion, that is really at the heart of what Blockchain 3.0 is about. It's about the community that actually shows up and is actually going to help us carry this thing across the wire. So that was my take on it. But I'd love to hear the impressions from others. Ed, you were there. What was your feeling? Hello?
Hey, I don't know that Ed's on the call.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I heard him on the call. Okay. Kelly, what was your impression?
Overall impressions, just excellent. You know, I'm always humbled when this community gets together and is willing to leave their families, their jobs, and some travel many thousands of miles to come together in support of this project. I'm really grateful for those 40-odd people who volunteered to help launch the testnet and participate with us not only on the day we launched it, but also the 2 days prior, who worked very hard and dedicated a lot of time to helping make that a very positive effort and contributed their talents to do that. So it's just really great to see people turn out for it. If you did attend the conference, please make sure that you fill out the survey that you got via email. We really do use that information to make a better conference the next time. We will also be going out with a survey to the entirety of the membership as we look forward to planning our Con4 taking place in Q1 of 2019.
Thank you very much. It's after 9 in the evening. I'm here with Natasha's relatives, and we're just about to sit down to dinner. So I'm going to turn it over to Meta to do the dev update, and I'll check back in a little while. But I really appreciate everyone's engagement and support. Meta, you ready to give the dev update?
I am.
Awesome.
Can everyone see my screen? The correct screen?
Yes.
Great. Yep. Awesome. All right. So I'm here to give the development update for this week. As everyone is aware, the development team spent a lot of time at RCon 3 last week.
Matt, can you just zoom in a little bit, please?
Oh, it's too small? Sure.
Yeah, just zoom in a little bit for the live stream. It's possible.
How's that?
That's a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. So as I was saying, the development team was at RCon 3 last week. So we're going to talk a lot about what we're working on as part of this sprint. We entered our next sprint, sprint 16, yesterday on Monday, day before yesterday. So I'm happy to report that we did refresh the testnet. As Greg indicated, that Kent found and fixed several non-deterministic bugs on the platform while he was working with Kvan on the RSong demo. We rolled those out to the testnet this Tuesday. Can I ask everyone to mute if you are not speaking? Thank you. And I'm pleased to report that we were able to perform a staggered update and preserve the original blockchain state. So that's very good. We didn't have to wipe the state and relaunch. And from what I can see so far, the nodes are stable and they are up. And I will be publishing an endpoint for deploy propose. As Greg indicated, we really need folks to start developing dApps against the blockchain so we can get feedback on what the user experience is like, what are the requirements coming in from dApp developers, so we can make sure that we build a delightful experience for dApp developers when they write applications to leverage the RChain platform. I'm focusing on detailing out the rest of the releases. I anticipate that this will be done by the end of the week. Also working on the test plan and SLA for HackerOne. We're working on engaging with HackerOne to perform a wide variety of security tests against the RChain software. And we're really looking at scope creep at this point. Where we really want to limit and lock down what we will deliver for Mercury. So again, that feedback on what is really important to DApp developers, just calling it out again, that we really need folks working with the platform. The rolling team, we are aware that there's an issue with show blocks, and we suspect that this may be related to context switching around threads. One of the developers is doing some preliminary investigation. For the time being, if you want to take a look at the blocks on the node, we recommend that you use show block, blocks hash. When a node receives a block or adds it to the DAG, you have the hash available there in the console log. So just pass that parameter into show block, and it will return that information on that individual block. Work continues in the name registry. Expect to have that done by the end of the sprint. And from once it is complete, we'll be porting some of the blessed contracts over to use the registry. We're focusing on stability in the interpreter. Specifically, we're doing work on the stack management. We observed some stack overflow errors, so it's time to take a step back and look at some of the edge cases around the interpreter and make sure it's robust and stable. The team met today to discuss the Casper block store, and the goals being to really have a comprehensive story around validator recovery. What happens when a validating node has to go offline for a variety of reasons? How is the last known state preserved? How do they recover that state and catch up just the portion of the state, right? You don't really want to have to start from the beginning every time your node restarts. That really isn't that's not really a good recovery story, and we know we need to do better. So we're talking about that as well as performance improvements, right? We need the system to be as fast as it possibly can be. And so there's opportunity to take a look at performance there. Casper team is focused on fixing the invalid bonds cache bug. We observed this in the test net. I was able to reproduce it even after we got some of the non-deterministic errors fixed and patched. I was able to reproduce it on my local or on my testing environment. So we're looking at that. We're also uplifting the integration tests by moving these to PyTest and making the tests more modular. And this enables developers to very quickly and easily add new tests to the integration test harness. So for those of you that are not aware, we have 2 tiers of testing. We have unit test, which is typically done much more fine-grained testing at the function level within the code. And integration tests really involve running node as an actual product, multiple nodes running together, and then running through a variety of scenarios. So we want to make the latter more robust and have much more in terms of scenarios baked into them. One of the scenarios, by example, is to create a star configuration for a network versus a fully connected graph. So most of the configurations we see here are fully connected graphs. We see a star configuration in one instance when we're launching the new network. So during Genesis launch, we have star configuration where all the nodes are connected directly to the bootstrap and messages are going to and from the bootstrap node. So we're testing a variety of network configurations to see how block passing works, how the communications layer works. And so these are new and more detailed integration tests that we hope to continue improving on. Once these integration tests this new PyTest piece has been completed, we will be turning this work over to the SRE team. So good news, we have an SRE team. We welcome Adam to the project, and we have another SRE engineer joining us in a couple of weeks. So Monday. That will round Monday, even faster. Yay. So that will round us out to a nice 4-member team. Jeremy will be going to work on Pyrofix projects. He's desperately needed on Office and to support the Pyrofix team, but he'll be leaving us with a nice solid team of engineers that will be able to support the DevOps, development operations, continuous integration, and production engineering of the node, right? So when I've worked with site reliability teams in the past, they have really used the software, monitored the software, and come back to us with, enhancement requests such as, we need a way to scrape all the logs. We need mechanisms to know what the versions of the node, what are all the different versions that the nodes are running. So they provide a very different perspective that we need to basically engineer into the node, right? So they will provide a lot of requirements as well as perform a lot of production and end user testing on the node. So very, very excited to have them. They have a backlog on the DevOps pipeline. We're going to work on avoiding excessive rebuilds on the node. We're going to look at including performance testing, and we're going to be addressing Travis latency issues as part of that work. So that's the first project they're kicking off, is really about DevOps and automated testing, because that helps accelerate engineering, right? It helps accelerate the rate at which engineers can make changes, having confidence that the automated testing harness will catch any issues. We are investigating moving to finer grained locking at LMDB. I've heard some feedback about the performance test. I was pretty pleased with the initial round of the performance test, but the fine grained locking has a wonderful story. We ran one test after we moved the lock, and we were able to yield an encouraging results of 8 to 10,000 COM events per second. And we ran the wide contact to achieve this. And you can see here, I'm sharing my screen. This is just a one-time test. This will not work for all roll-line contracts, but it does work for the wide contract because it's completely disjoint. So there's no lock contention on channels with this contract. So we know that LMDB can eventually get us to this higher performance. We just need to have a really solid locking story to make sure that it's stable, right? That execution in the tuple space is stable, even with fine-grained locking. So there is definitely some work to do there, but the team is very encouraged by the initial results, so we're going to be pursuing this aggressively. That's my update. So, we're also focusing on the threading model, which I alluded to earlier. So we know that the threading model is not functional correct now in the node. So Alexander is leading this effort. He worked on the threading model in Roscala and requested to work on this. So we're very excited to have him kind of stepping up and taking a holistic view at what the node's threading approach is, and coming up with something that is solid and stable and will be more elastic, so that the node will consume resources so that it can provide the maximum performance capable for the hardware specification that it has available to it. And with that, I will turn it over for questions.
So Meta, I heard a lot in the room where the validators were starting up the test network on what kind of specifications were required. Or do we have any more insight now that we've got actual validators running software on what specifications might look like for hardware?
We don't have, we have a preliminary footprint that we came away with, right? You'd want to have a machine with multiple cores and at least 32 gigs of RAM. But we are going to have to revisit that, because as the team does more performance testing, that is going to shift, right? So the work that is being done with the block store is going to affect that number. The work that's being done with LMDB and removing the lock is also going to affect that number. So we have a number for today with the architecture as it is today, but I fully expect that number will shift over time.
Is there a target size you want that memory footprint?
Just a sec. The way it will shift is to fewer requirements. You won't have to have more than what our estimate is now.
Right. So when I talk about, that's right, Mike. So to kind of expound on what Mike is saying, when I talk about elastic, right, what will happen is if you are running a node with a smaller memory and CPU footprint, your node will perform more slowly, correct? If you have more RAM, disk space, CPUs, your node will perform more quickly. So that's what we will do. That's the intention of this work, is that when I talk about elasticity, what I mean is that the node will consume as much resources that are available to it to provide the fastest performance. Now that's separate from consensus, right? Because as I talked about in my presentation, the consensus layer, that level of latency, is completely separate from what the actual machine itself is doing. But not unrelated, but separate, right? Because you have other things to think about: the size of the network, how connected it is, how geographically distributed the nodes are, what the network bandwidth is between nodes. All of those factors are going to affect the speed at which consensus operates. By the same token, your node, when it receives a block, will be bound by its own specifications with how quickly it can process that block, right? So they're separate, but they are related. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question. Is there going to be a cap on the amount of resources you can use on a validator? Like yeah.
Go ahead, continue.
Like if I was to have a server with say like two terabytes of RAM or something like that, just an example, that could all be utilized and on the network.
I see no reason why not.
And would there be a greater incentive for providing more resources?
Absolutely. I mean, the incentive is that you can process more transactions per second, right? So let's look at it this way. If you wanted a serious validator on the RChain network, you would invest in the capital expenditure and get your node on a backbone, right? And you would potentially, connect with, maybe not trust, but connect with other validators that want to do the same thing. And then you would create this shard that is very, very, very high performance. And you guys can churn through, right? You and these validators can churn through 80,000 transactions a second, arguably, right? That's going to mean a lot more transaction fees, lower latency. So yes, that shard would make more profit, right? Because they have, and makes sense because they have invested more in capital expenditure, bandwidth costs, energy, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome, thank you.
What was the question, Meta? I just rejoined.
The question was: is there any cap on the ceiling in terms of the physical specifications for node? And my answer was no. You want to provision 2 terabytes of RAM and build a shard that does that? That's lightning fast. Fantastic.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we totally encourage that. Of course, there are all kinds of pressures here, right? What we're trying to do is not tilt the landscape too much to centralization too fast. But yes, that's exactly right. What Meta said is exactly right.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Meta, I have a question for you with regard to the incentivized testnet. Is there some update on that?
That would
certainly
be Bill Strauch, right?
Yep, I think he's on the line. He can go ahead and give an update.
Oh, well, yeah. So we're shifting a little bit. So the original idea for the incentivized testnet was to start with these kind of challenges that incentivize participation in the testnet with Part 7. But as there are some missing features, we will postpone the start of the incentivized testnet to a later version. That is expected currently to be the version in December. Other than that, currently figuring out how to communicate that and trying to come up with evaluation models. Yeah. So the basic idea is figured out, but we are trying to work on the details.
Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any other questions about the dev update?
I have a question. Will the co-op itself be running nodes and collecting transaction fees?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Is that going to be the main source of funding for the co-op?
No, it won't.
Okay.
Any other questions? Awesome. Okay. Well, let's turn it over to Reflective and get an update from them.
Hi, everybody. This is Greg. Coming off of Berlin, I just wanted to first give a really big thank you to all of the portfolio companies that made it there. We ended up having, I think, 11 or 12 of them, totaling close to 25 bodies that were there. So that was great. And we had a really good session with Ned Robinson. I believe that all the portfolio companies that were there had a chance to meet him in person for all the onboarding processes. I know Med and her team got a chance to spend quite a bit of time with him, and I can't tell you how much that meant to those companies and me talking to them since then. So that was great to have all of those companies there, and I appreciate everybody in the community that reached out to them as well to talk to them. So that's the first thing. Second, we've got a deal that we are just closing right now. I can't talk about it now, but next week we will. So we'll have a number 22 lined up, and that will be announced next week. On a side note, we have a Seattle RChain meetup that's happening tonight. And the only reason I mention it, obviously everybody's not in Seattle, but since Christian's not here and we're not streaming that, we are going to do it via Zoom. So we will record that, but you can also join that. Rebecca will post that onto Discord and everywhere that it needs to go. We're going to do an update on what happened at DevCon, and also Renal is going to join us and talk a little bit more on the validator node side of things. That starts at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and it's being held at the Reflective offices. So if you're in the area, please come. Otherwise, that Zoom channel is there. And then last, I will hand it over to Renal, Kevin, Steve, whoever wants to talk a little bit on the validator side, unless, Greg, you have a separate time set aside for that on this call.
No, we can go ahead and go with the validator sale and then hand it over to Bithia.
Okay, go ahead, guys, jump in on that.
So this is Steve. I'll start and then maybe pass it over to Renal. We have made very significant progress in setting up the processes, and we've had numerous discussions regarding the validator economics, the validator revenue models. We've been monitoring and discussing with community members for the last week all of the concerns that have been raised. I can assure you that we are actively coming up with a solution that makes sense, but we're trying to do it carefully, so as if we're not responding to certain individuals and their needs and requests and making changes, and then having other individuals' needs come up that are different, and then consequently we end up just responding to a handful of voices. We're trying to take the big picture approach, and it's a very difficult task. I know I made a comment yesterday on Discord that Reflective is not setting the policy. The Reflective is simply working with co-op management to make suggestions and bring feedback from the community to the management team, and we're discussing it together cooperatively, but ultimately it's the management team and or board of co-op that makes that decision. So with that, I'll pass it over to Renal, and if he's got some comments.
No, Steve, I think you covered everything. I just want to reinforce the point that there's a lot of comments on things that potentially could be changed about the validator sale. If we took every single comment, it would be untenable, both from a technical perspective and complexity. But we're trying to find a way to address, especially the most valid concerns. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just so you guys are aware, we had numerous comments, feedback, and inputs with respect to the first private sale we did, and with respect to the second private sale we did. And I can assure you that nobody's ever completely satisfied with the conditions of the sales. It just doesn't happen. So we have to. It's always finding a kind of compromise as opposed to finding a solution that makes everybody happy. Great. So thanks for the update. And So now over to Pythia.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Apologies for the background noise. I'm waiting for the car, and they don't seem to be able to figure out what street corner I'm on. So real quickly, RCon 3 was great. We probably had 3-4 of our companies come in, including some portfolio companies and special guest star from Deutsche Telekom, who is now looking at RChain to see how we can use that and how they can become part of the validator network, as well as be able to incorporate it into some of their efforts. So more on that as that evolves. Lucidity came out and did a great presentation on moving from their plasma network to RChain shards, which is, just again another testimony to how the network is allowing people to move on to a superior technology. I had a great meeting with Ella from the German cooperative on digital identity and governance. So we're connecting her with some of the resources that we've invested in. I know that she had a good meeting with Chris Boscolo, and Chris also met with the chairman of the German cooperative. So we're figuring out how we connect those dots together. Yesterday, Monday and Tuesday, Tamara and I spoke at the Blockchain Seattle conference. Great job with the Department of Financial Institutions on how we can start helping move things ahead from a regulatory compliance standpoint here in Washington. I met with one of the local senators and had the same discussion on how we could grow that using RChain and other ecosystems. And I'm off to a blockchain coalition event talking to officials in the States as how we'll do that. And we'll have some pretty exciting updates on that. So that's my update for this week. Thanks. Bye. Sorry, any questions?
All right, thank you very much, Lawrence. So I wanted to look at what it's going to take going forward, and I have to say to everyone that it's utterly essential now that we start building on the platform. If we don't write applications to this platform, it will not stabilize. I don't know how to stress this enough. The only way software gets stable is we start putting it into use. And it is not sufficient to just write tests. Tests are a good way to do coverage. Correct by construction, as much as we can, is a good way to ensure the quality of the software. Unfortunately, a huge percentage of this software is written, in languages.
Greg, you mute yourself.
Sorry, I stopped because there's a lot of dog noise. Unfortunately, a lot of the Node software currently is written in languages that won't yet allow us to do correct by construction at the level of individual code files. So we have to rely on traditional quality assurance for a lot of the first software, and so test coverage just doesn't cut it in general. The best thing we can do is to put it in use, which means that is exactly why we have all of these companies signed up to write against this software. So and anything the community can do now to start poking and prodding at the software is what we're going to need to do in order to make sure that it's stabilized. There are enough features in place now that we can do significant and serious applications. And so it's time to start exercising the node as much as possible. Do I have sort of any questions or comments about this? especially from Pythia and Reflective.
No, Greg, not a question, but a statement. I mean, those are really good points, and I think that if we can sit with Meta or Kelly or anybody from the dev team and work with our development teams, our portfolio companies, and come up with the right kinds of use cases and test cases, and we can crowdsource a lot of that and really make it robust.
Yeah, you should also include Ned Robinson in those discussions, because Ned is going to be help managing all of those solutions. So please be sure to include Ned in that.
We're in the process of working with Ned now and coordinating across all of the different companies that are going to be building applications. One of the things that keeps coming up, and I've seen, again, I guess validated recently, is that there's some documentation that isn't up to date. And I think that, for mass adoption of people developing really cool things outside of those that we funded, that's going to be a requirement. And so I don't know what the step is there, whether that's a co-op-led effort or Perfects, but I think that would also be really useful for mass adoption outside of just those that we funded.
We have a new hire starting this later this week who's going to help support a lot of that, and absolutely recognizing you're spot on. There's definitely a big gap in not only in documentation that isn't created, but in keeping documentation that is created updated. And so we're looking forward to welcoming Jack to the team starting later this week to help support that effort.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, and
he's got a real bias. He's got a real bias towards documentation. He's a solid technical guy. So I was extremely impressed with him when I did my interview with him. So yeah, I'm really stoked to have him on board to create the documentation. And Kelly, also with respect to the Rolang language, we also will be getting some documentation as well from Derek, correct?
The syntax and semantics will be out in January.
Yep.
So this is Jack you're talking about, the new hire?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Derek is writing the documentation for the semantics of Rolang, and that will be done in January, and Jack starts before that, like next week, I think.
Like tomorrow.
Yeah. I spoke at length with Derek, and I'm quite excited about having him put out the semantics document. That'll be really good, because that's also backed by the K framework work that Derek has been doing.
Yeah, so I'd also like to coordinate with everybody on this. So I met with Derek from marketing and Leia and Suku. Also, I'm working with Joshi and trying to spin up a team to write comprehensive tutorials covering everything from our node setup and running validators to intro to Rolang and then writing smart contracts. So we've just started forming a working group and need to get some funding for that. So I'll be reaching out.
Very good. Very good. I just want to mention that there are a couple of Derek's. One is Derek Barris, who is with the biz dev and marketing, and the other is Derek. Meta, help me out. I can't remember Derek's last name.
Derek
What?
Sorensen.
Yeah, right. That's right. Who is working on the K framework semantics for Rolang. Good. Okay. So with that, let me open it up for any more questions in terms of the roadmap. I think everyone understands more or less where we are,
So I've got a question about what will be required in terms of on-chain governance of the root shard. Is if the community is governing what is allowed on the root shard, do we have to include code for example, censoring data that is shown to be harmful in some way? Do we have to include code for managing the requirements of a validator that is joining the root shard? Are there any requirements beyond paying the $1,500 staking fee and the joining fee?
Yeah, so I know.
How does the cooperative intend to govern the content on chain?
Yes, I know that Ed has been pushing for this. I think currently we are erring very much on the side of letting things be, and which means minimal requirements on the code and more of the governance happening in terms of human agency here. So that's in fact sort of the raison d'etre for the co-op. In many ways, is the governance of the chain, and in particular, the root shard. That shouldn't result in new code requirements, but I think that we're going to be learning on our feet, right? This is the first time we've ever had a blockchain that had the capacity to really put significant data on the chain. So this is territory in general. And I hope. Go ahead.
Oh, quick question. I didn't know that it would actually be possible to manage content on the chain, and I guess I'm curious, like how it might be managed and what that might look like.
Yeah, so you can put
at the moment, it is not possible to take down contracts that were proposed to the chain. So if that is a requirement, we need to be thinking about that, months ago, but at least as soon as possible. I am encouraged to hear that we are not intending to censor stuff on chain. If we do have to censor stuff, it would end up being essentially a fork of.
I would love to hear that censorship is impossible.
Currently, if the cooperative is told by the government, you take this down or we're going to sue you, there's no other choice than to censor and fork, right? For the ones in the United States. And so essentially it would be a fork where the ones in the US have to remove that content and the other ones would maintain it and become a separate shard. The content would still be available in any jurisdiction that didn't enforce that. But I can easily imagine these content issues coming back in the form of legal requirements.
I absolutely agree. That's the general scheme of things is that we err on the side of no censorship and minimal intervention, except when it comes to regulatory compliance and other kinds of things, which have to do with the legal presence of the co-op and the network with respect to the jurisdictions in which it's operating. Does that answer your question?
Not really. Almost makes the co-op's existence sound like a risk to the chain. And I get what you're saying about err on the side of no censorship, and I think that's really good. It just it also sounds like, well, I guess any decentralized network faces this.
What do you mean by risk to the chain? He just said you can fork. So technology is not a risk, right? Because the technology is out there. What do you mean by it's a risk?
Well, so as far as I understand it, the chain is going to be tied to the co-op, which personally I think is really cool. I think that the risky part of this is that the co-op is then the co-op is at risk for things that happen on the chain. And so if the co-op is able to control the chain in any way, the co-op is a risk kind of to the immutability of history on the blockchain.
No, I would disagree. I think the real issue is whoever's operating in a particular jurisdiction, they will be held. And
so Greg, let me restate that. If the co-op isn't at risk, then validators would be at risk.
That's correct. So by having the co-op have presence, what we create is the interface between the jurisdictional regulation. Right. That's part of the intent of the whole structure.
All right. I mean, I guess we're gonna have to launch the chain and play it out, and I certainly think we should do that. So I guess a lot of this we'll see.
Yeah, but now I think you're pointing at one of the reasons why we have to have multiple co-ops that are siblings of each other, that are autonomous organizations, that allow us to span some of the different jurisdictional pressures and requirements. Right. This is exactly.
And I think that the fact that we can say that there's no way for the co-op to remove it from the entire chain. The best we can do is remove it from the North American nodes that are in that jurisdiction. So you can't blame us for stuff that's on the chain that we don't have control over. That seems like a reasonable technical defense against such requests from governments.
Right, I hope that's the case. I hope that they feel that they can't blame us for things that are on the chain that we don't have control over, but I guess in some sense we don't really know.
Yeah, but come on, we've seen this play out before, right? We know exactly what happened to Napster.
True.
Right. So we shouldn't be going into this as if our eyes are we don't have 20/20 hindsight. So that's exactly why we have the structure that we have is to address how this has happened in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
No. These are absolutely wonderful questions, and I really appreciate it. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I'd like to make one quick comment, Greg, about the footage from the ARCon. That is in my position and Nick Harper's possession, and we are working pretty much around the clock to get this edited and uploaded. And there is a process, but I hope within 48 to 72 hours, at least all the talks will be available. Nick is working on editing all the interviews he shot. If you were interviewed at ARCon, you know who you are. There was no talent release forms really signed, so this is the process that we'll have to talk about in the future. I think we pretty much interviewed all co-op and core devs and people very close to the project, so I think everyone is relatively cool with, the content being recorded, but that's something we'll take to marketing. I'm having a call tomorrow also with Kelly Foster to talk about the improvements of the process so there's quicker turnaround in the future for people that either couldn't make it to the conference or couldn't perhaps watch the live stream because of their phone connection or their computer connection. So that's all in at least my mind. And we just want to keep working at this and making it better.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the hard work that you did at the conference and that you and Nick have been doing since the conference. It's it really makes a difference to have all this media and makes a difference to our community to be able to track what it is we're doing and to make sure that we're on top of the things of making sure that we're delivering on our promises. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add on that. I'd also like to thank the marketing team that was there, and it was kind of frustrating the first few days, but we I think we walked away with pretty damn good content. And personally, I am excited to see how the footage from Burning Man will be put together, because I think we got some really good work done. Obviously, kudos to Nick for that. And in general, the last piece of the puzzle is really thanking Firefox for hiring StreamSpark. They were, great. They really honestly kicked ass in getting all those streams up. I was honestly pretty impressed. They were able to get 5 rooms going on their CDN pretty much flawlessly. So, and they delivered all the content before we left. So, great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay. Unless there's anything else burning, I'm going to say that we yield back 3 minutes to the community.
I will chime in real quick. This is Fabian, just on the topic of content. Based on some words that Mr. Greg Meredith mentioned around what is your must, what must you do? Some content was created over at RCon 3. The link is just been posted in the Zoom group chat, so you can watch it and see what your fellow RChain team members are thinking about.
Awesome. Thank you, Fabian.
Surely.
Well, I can just say that as a closing note, Kayvon and I must get the last little bug fixed so we can switch the RSong thing over to the RSong shard. And you have my word, that will be done as soon as possible. All right. Thanks to everyone. Talk to you soon. Ciao, ciao.
Create technology that empowers individuals.